This presentation provides a very brief but informative review of what is going to be presented during exam number 1, what it measures, and how the exam works. So just as a reminder, exam number 1 is going to focus on those skills associated with understanding what science is and what scientific research is. From here, the course materials and experiences will address aspects of specific types of research designs and then some of the concepts and skills in terms of what goes on in those designs regarding sampling and analyzing data and that sort of thing. But exam number 1 focuses on science and scientific research. Now, looking at another one of the course big pictures associated with the course project, the notes for part 1 address science and scientific research, and these notes do support in many ways what you are also going to be sort of applying within the first part of the course project. So I just wanted to remind you that some of the concepts and constructs and ideas that are presented for part 1 in the notes do also align with what you're going to be experiencing and performing for the first part of the course project. So in this very brief review, I want to make it very clear what objectives are going to be measured on the course exam, and then give you some information about the exam specifics. And I'm not going to be presenting an overview of any of the notes because those are already covered in other videos. I won't be giving you additional practice as part of a review because that's also presented on the course website. This is just designed to help you better understand and be absolutely clear about what is going to be measured on the exam and then how the exam is going to operate. So first, let's take a look at the objectives that are going to be measured. Now, the screen includes a lot of words, but I include them here just to point out that the exam will be measuring all of the skills that are listed for objectives 1.3 to 1.17. And I didn't include all of these on one slide because the text would have been too small. But note that the first 2 objectives for part 1 address social science research and education and counseling as 2 very important fields within the social sciences that constitute the fields that the students in this class are currently working toward or are in at this time. So those aren't measured on the course exam, but they're included because the notes are there, and it's important to understand the fact that this course focuses on social science, but education and counseling are 2 very important fields within the social sciences. So the skills that are going to be measured begin with you being able to define what a theory is and to be able to differentiate between a theory and a model. And then it goes from there. So again, I'm not going to be sort of reiterating all of the important information about these objectives, but I just wanted to be absolutely clear that the course exam addresses the outcomes for that begin at 1.3 and that end at 1.17. And notice that for 1.17, the objective states, given a hypothesis, determine the most likely extraneous or control variables that would need to be controlled in a research study designed to collect data that could support or not support the veracity of the hypothesis. So obviously, to measure that objective, the exam will provide you with a hypothesis, and you have to consider or identify or select the most likely extraneous variables. So read through the objectives again and know that the way they're worded is precisely how they're going to be measured. So let's then take a look at some of the exam specifics. First of all, there's only 24 questions on the exam. That that addresses all of the objectives in one way or another. The exam is going to be timed. You will have 60 minutes to complete the exam. If any of the other documentation indicates any other amount of time, this is the actual time limit. And I repeat this when you go into D2L and you read through the directions for the exam. It will indicate that you have a 60-minute time limit. The exams, the items include multiple selection. That is, it's a multiple choice, but more than one of the choices constitute the correct answer, and it could be one or more. There are also multiple choice items and a couple of true and false items. Notice that these are all selected response items. That is, you will not be writing anything. You will not be defining anything in terms of having to type anything in. If you do have to perform the skill of defining something, then you will be really performing the skill of identifying the correct definition of. Not precisely the same cognitive skill, but it is good enough, as they say in the testing business. Now it's one-way linear navigation on this test, and this is very important to understand. That is, when you answer a question and you move on to the next question, you cannot go back and do anything about previous items. Once you answer it, then it's done and you move on. Now, all of the choices for these items are going to be presented in random order, unless there's an inherent order to the items. That in other words, it makes sense to order them in terms of how they're presented. I also want to point out that the items are presented in the exam. They are also presented in random order. So anybody taking this exam will have a different order. And if you have a question about an item on the exam later, it won't be helpful to me if you say it was the third question on the exam, because I won't know what your third question was. I'll know what you'll have to be a little more specific than that. Also, there's limited feedback provided. So in other words, you'll know if you got your items correct or not, but you won't be given feedback or any elaborative feedback at this time. I will provide elaborative feedback for any items that are that the class has struggled with statistically, and I'll put a debrief of the exam up a few days after you complete it. So just know that you will know your score, but the feedback will be limited. And it is possible after you receive your initial score that your score will be adjusted. Sometimes in these exams, based on the data, I can identify some specific items that where they didn't function properly. And that is, the wording might have been ambiguous. Some of the choice options might not have been as clearly defined as I intended for them to be.